welcome to this session on AI, SIAM and the new rules of governance with HCLTech. We'll just give it a few minutes for people to join the session. We've got a lot of people registered today, so we'll give that a few minutes for people to come in. But today we are going to be focused on looking at how AI works within a SIAM model, and that includes some use cases, it includes looking at opportunities, it includes looking at threats, and also the governance that's required to effectively leverage AI in a SIAM environment. So we've got two real experts joining us from HCLTech, who I will ask to introduce themselves momentarily. But first, let's take a little look at the agenda for today's session. So we're going to be doing some quick introductions just to let you know who this is behind the screen. We are then going to go and look at some of the opportunities and threats for AI in a SIAM ecosystem, particularly. We're going to look at some use cases for AI in a SIAM environment. We're going to touch on governance, and then there's a chance to follow up with HCLTech, so some resources that we'll be sharing, and also an opportunity for some Q&A as well. However, it would be lovely to hear from you during the session as well. So if you've got a question, please don't feel like you have to wait until the end. We will be pausing at a few points in the presentation to give you an opportunity to ask questions about the topic that we've just discussed. So please keep popping your questions into the chat, into the Q&A box, whatever works best for you, and we will have an opportunity to pick those up. So it's always nice to hear from you during the session as well. So we'll be doing that, and we'll leave time for that at the end also. My name's Claire Agutter. I'm the founder of Scopism. We are the home of SIAM Best Practice. And today, this event is hosted by Be Executive Events, who are our event partner. And it's featuring experts from HCLTech, who are a founding member of the Scopism SIAM community. They hold Scopism SIAM Assured status, and they are supporting the evolution of SIAM best practice constantly. We'll come back to that later on, but I'm going to ask our two panelists to briefly introduce themselves. So Prashant, I'm going to come to you first, please.
Sure, Claire. Hey guys, Prashant Bhat here. Have been part of HCL's SIAM practice ever since we started all about 15 years ago, and I've been involved in a fair few bit of things when it comes to SIAM. And at the moment, I work with HCL on the new offerings and new developments. So we're looking at how SIAM as a concept is evolving in the industry, and where are we going to go into the future. That's what we are looking at. And AI obviously being part of the new generation of trends that are coming up, obviously is of interest to us on how do we evaluate, how do we leverage it to the best of the abilities. We've been very closely working with Aushdeep, who I'll hand over to introduce himself next. Aushdeep.
Thank you, Prashant. Hi, everyone. I'm Aushdeep. I have been part of HCLTech SIAM team ever since inception, along with Prashant, and been involved in deploying SIAM solutions, as well as now selling SIAM solutions. So my core job right now is to I lead the SIAM PreSales as well as the SIAM capability practice around here. And as part of my work, we are deploying these solutions day in, day out, as well as we are working with customers to generate more use cases as we speak about it. And this is what we're going to discuss today in our journey today as to how we've evolved through it and what we see as part of the future areas and how we see it evolving into along with SIAM.
Fabulous, thank you. So what you've got here in this panel is decades of SIAM and service management experience and a huge amount of AI experience as well. So as I said before, any questions that you've got for Aushdeep and Prashant, please do put them in the chat and we would be happy to pick them up during the session. So Prashant, over to you. Let's start to talk about AI in a SIAM ecosystem and some of the opportunities and threats.
Sure, Claire. For past few years, we've been tracking as to where are we headed in terms of AI workspace overall, right? And in terms of the overall evolving edge of the AI, most of the people know about this bit, which is the robotic process automation, right? Most of the IT organizations are already along this path. Then, as we know, came AI, which was essentially our machine learning models, our natural language processing, the predictive analysis side of things. Then we started moving towards a Gen AI story where the LLMs are evolving. The natural language processing started consuming large language models. And this is where it shifted from pure text based to images, code, audio, and so on and so forth. Essentially, this is where things are now becoming more and more interesting in terms of what AI is capable of delivering. Earlier, it was still you had to teach the AI to a significant degree before it could do anything. Now it is evolving by itself, and that's where the very next stage comes in, which is agentic AI. Effectively, autonomous bits of code that are capable of planning, acting, and learning independently. You essentially give it a goal and you let it run, and then it continues to work on your behalf constantly, right? And this is where we are seeing the changeover into a multi-step reasoning and decision making process. Some of them are capable of fully autonomous mode as well, although most of the organizations are keeping them human in the loop. So, before you hit the go, you still cross check with a human being before you do that. In terms of the organizations themselves, right, most of the organizations fall into three buckets, right? Those who are just beginning the adoption, people who are still catching up on it, they are sort of between the RPA and the AI mode. They're just sort of putting in their new chatbots, trying to figure out where is the world going to go. In certain cases, they will still have some of the AI stuff being embedded into agentic AI side of story, but that's where the beginning organizations are. The second batch, who were the early adopters of AI, effectively are now looking at moving towards AI to Gen AI. They have already got down the robotic process automation down pat, and they are looking at how can they leverage the large language models, how can they have enhanced automation and creativity, and how do they make sure that Gen AI is capable of consuming those auto learning patterns. And lastly, what I would typically term as digital native, right? So these are the organizations that have begun their journey really early, or whose business models themselves are part of digital side of things. Those are the ones who are looking at getting things done towards agentic AI side of the story, right? So going ahead, we are going to see more and more of this go around in the wider world. When it comes to looking at these and the trends that we are seeing three areas in which things are progressing, right? One is the IT infrastructure side of things.
Prashant, I'm just going to stop you for a second because your audio just degraded slightly.
Oh, okay.
If you want to try a little test.
Okay, hopefully this works.
Yes, that's much better. Thank you. Just seeing a few comments in the chat.
Right. Don't know what happened there, but that's technology for you. Sometimes things just happen for no reason. Some gremlin somewhere. So the three key areas where we are seeing AI starting to make its impact, right? One is around infrastructure operations. So this is the next generation self-heal, self-optimizing capability. Some of this is driven by the OEMs themselves, right? Whether that's the cloud native OEMs or it is OEMs who are supporting the hardware. We are seeing the AI chips coming in. Some of the stuff is being delivered from there. The second one is the service desk BPO side of operations where you're helping your end users. So this is all around shift left, ticket elimination, user assistance being provided, and so on and so forth. But more than pure IT management, this is more in terms of helping the users to achieve their goals, right? So it's more around BPO side of things. And the third one, obviously, is the development lifecycle, where most of the testing, for example, that's going into a fully autonomous mode. We are looking at business process to code transformations being done by AI, where rather than somebody sitting down and coding it out, um, you are essentially providing a business process diagram to the tool set, and then it develops everything else by itself. So those are the three key areas where we are seeing AI beginning to make an impact. In terms of SIAM, that's really important because if you look at it, effectively all the three key areas that SIAM typically deals with, whether that's infrastructure, whether that's service desk or the business process optimization that happens via process mining, or the AppOps, DevOps lifecycle. All of that is being affected, as we can see from here. The potential impact that we have seen in the overall scheme of things, about 10 to 15% impact on infrastructure and operations, whether that's in terms of optimizing the people aspect of it, or the reduction in MTTRs, MTBFs, and so on and so forth. We are seeing efficiency gains close to about 10 to 15% is what most of the organizations are targeting at. Obviously, depending on how far you are in the journey, that changes. If you're on really, you're just beginning your RPA, then from there to agentic AI, the gain seems much bigger. But most of them, to move to the next stage about this, is what you're seeing. One of the bigger gains is actually around the BPO side of things, where you're assisting your users. Essentially, most of the users are either now able to resolve the tickets themselves, or get the service delivered by themselves, rather than have to wait on someone else to do the job for them, 30 to 35%. And similarly, for development lifecycle, we are seeing about 30 to 35% gains, is what's being targeted by most of the organizations. Looking at it, seems like a large chunk of things, but let's not forget your infrastructure, your SDBPO is in itself part of the overall IT organization. So while AI is having a significant impact, and it's being felt because it is at quite visible touch points, right? It is still something that you need to take in with a pinch of salt, because the basic fabric on which you're building that AI is really important. And most of the challenges that we are seeing in terms of the implementation challenges are around whether your basic fabric is right, or is it suboptimal, right? That's where we are seeing things go haywire for some of the customers. When it comes to, all of this is happening in the wider world, where do the opportunities exist? So for us, opportunities are existing at three different levels, right? One is right at the strategic level. Once you move into a place where you've got your AI beginning to draw insights, it's trying to figure out exactly where do you stand in terms of the process optimization. Could you create a slightly better solution, whether that's in terms of avoiding the risks, or whether that's in terms of innovative solutioning. So within development life cycles, you see a champion and challenger model emerge. That champion and challenger model, there are some organizations which are looking at putting your entire challenger model in an AI, where the AI has to then figure out if there is a slightly better way of doing things, right? Essentially, across the supplier boundaries is where SIAM will derive maximum benefit out of it, and business model optimization as well, because AI and Gen AI, rather AI and agentic AI, are more attuned to what your business needs. And once you have told it a goal, then it is able to identify the data and try and figure out where to go from there. Sorry, Avjit, was there something you wanted to add?
No, that's fine. Please go ahead.
Okay, all right. Then in terms of the next level, right, which is effectively the tactical level. For the tactical level, we are looking at key elements of quicker time to market once the business comes up with a demand, because of the changes that we are seeing in the development life cycle, as well as the process optimization. You can turn it around much quicker. The releases are happening much quicker. You will get reliability gains because testing is automated. Most of the places where things can fail, AI is identifying those and plugging those gaps straight away. This includes additional infrastructure being provisioned, scaling up or scaling down. So you're also looking at the cost optimization, and then obviously risk reduction, because all those single points of failures are already being predicted and taken care of. And finally, on the operational side of things, which is where the early adopters are, essentially it becomes your quicker time to fix, right? AI is able to tell you, okay, here is how last 50 tickets were resolved. Do you want to get it done in slightly different way, or here is another way of looking at it? Once your AI is contextualized to your environment, then it's able to find those quicker times. You're looking at cross provider efficiency gains as well. Most of the times, individual providers, and especially true for SIAM, provider looks at what is it that I can do in my sphere of things to make it quicker, make it more efficient. But while doing that, sometimes the touch points between the providers can get eroded. And those cross-provider efficiency gains is something AI is able to latch onto quite quickly because it's looking at the holistic picture. Enterprise level knowledge curation, whether that's in terms of creation of new knowledge articles, or looking at the existing knowledge articles, their currency, curation, publishing, and so on and so forth. And obviously cost avoidance, right from your individual software license assets that are being utilized properly, or it's your hardware assets or your cloud assets, right? All of those places we are looking at opportunities that AI can bring in. Aushdeep will talk about some of these as we go along and start looking at the specific use cases. While we are doing all of this, right, there are also certain really important challenges that need to be considered, which is where the governance has to come in. And these challenges are more in terms of three areas, right? One is the environmental complexities. Effectively, you've got multiple suppliers, all of whom would like to optimize their operations, and they will want to bring in multiple AIs. Picture that we are seeing emerge in the wider industry is some organizations are bringing in enterprise level AI capability, which cuts across the board. But then you will also have some of the providers coming in with specific capabilities which are relevant to their area of operation, whether that's development, whether that's business process, whether that's customer service management, and so on and so forth. How do you make sure that all of these AIs are playing along nicely, right? There is no overlap between them. How do you make sure they are contextualized properly? And how do you make sure you're not spreading it too wide? Because an AI that has been given too wide a remit could essentially start complicating things rather than simplifying them, right? So some of the environmental aspects also need to be looked at when you are putting in the right governance around the AI. Second key aspect that we are seeing as taking prominence is data considerations. For any AI to function properly, whether it's the traditional AI, the Gen AI, or the agentic AI, it needs a clean data set. An LLM and agentic to Gen AI is capable of handling an unstructured data set, but you still want to make sure the data set is clean, although it may be unstructured. Otherwise, you start getting AIs that are subscribing to conspiracy theories, for lack of better term. Effectively, that clean data set, its integrity, accuracy, and currency. How do you maintain that, and how do you make sure it's being utilized properly? Next one is number of consumers of this particular data set. How many AIs or how many people are going to look at it? Geopolitical boundaries for the consumption. We all know, for example, GDPR uh, has a built-in clause called right to be forgotten. If you've got certain data sets that are being consumed and that they invoke GDPR rules, how do you deal with those kind of things? And finally, data permeance. How long do you want your data to be available to the AI that's working for you? And once the AI has consumed the data, how much of it do you want it to remain in its conscience, and how do you mitigate that is also a question that still seems to be unanswered. People are still grappling with it. The third aspect, obviously, is based on all of these factors, how are you defining the guardrails? First one being the governance and compliance frameworks. None of us really have an option as to whether we will conform or not. These are laws being put into places by governments, but they are different, especially in a global landscape. You will have certain geographies or certain governments saying you can only keep data in this geographical location, can't be consumed elsewhere. How do you navigate through that maze is also becoming a challenge. Security and risk management, for obvious reasons, AI will start consuming your data. How will you make sure there's no data leaks? How will you make sure that the data is not being consumed by an AI who you do not want to consume the data in the longer run? Operational nuances: who consumes the data, who is going to utilize the AI, and who's going to utilize those results to what extent? When will these interactions take place? And obviously, finally, the bean counters: how much is it going to cost you? What kind of tokens are being used? Especially true in terms of agentic AI, because for agentic, you will start the run and then you will let it run. So all of these guardrails are also going to become really important. Where we are finding it really interesting in terms of SIAM is all of these apply not only to the organization itself, but also to each of the supplier landscapes that we are going to apply it to. Effectively, if you've got 50 suppliers and 50 suppliers bringing in their own AIs, you've got a lot of space for confusion. So those are some of the challenges that we are seeing as well. As we move on from this and try to figure out where do you want to go, um, aligning to space basic principles of SIAM, just like we create a supplier collaboration charter, an AI collaboration theme needs to be defined. The AIs need to work for the betterment of the customer's goals rather than individual organizations' goals. And the goal, the challenge then becomes how exactly do you make sure that happens? In terms of the overall use cases itself, I'll hand it over to Aushdeep in a second. But any questions or queries on topics that we have discussed so far, by all means, folks.
I'll just give people a couple of seconds to type if they've got any questions
Yeah.
so far. There is one question. You mentioned code reviews. Do
Yeah.
you have any information about what coding language those code reviews are being applied to?
So, 2 or 3 different places where we have seen code reviews taking place. Java seems to be the most common, but Microsoft isn't far behind. Those two I definitely remember while working on some of these aspects. But to be honest with you, the landscape is changing so fast that today, if I'm telling you 2, by tomorrow it might be 4. So yeah, watch this
But
space, as they say.
I believe it is question around static or dynamic. So yeah, in terms of application development, the SAST coding review is also happening by AI agents. It is easier, it is more uh, repeatable, and it is more doable. Dynamic, you see a lot of places where there are runtime systems, and there are a lot of solutions which are coming in the market. But it is not just the code review, it is looking at the overall vulnerabilities also, which are coming into those. So it is both static as well as dynamic. But yeah,
Absolutely.
dynamic is certainly expensive, and static is basically which is from where this all auto coding and coding errors and coding audits originated. That's still existing, and that's being automated further across the system.
And we are also seeing a fair amount of emergence of organizations that are focusing on optimizing the existing code base. That seems to be another one of the industry trends where legacy code is being optimized using AI. So yeah, some interesting happenings there. All right, if there
Certainly,
are no,
certainly.
yeah,
It's the CI/CD which is driving everything. So basically, in the entire pipeline, uh, AI is evolving quite a lot in terms of application testing, application releases, and application rollouts. And that's really aligning with your completely integrated and development rollout life cycle. So all the use cases are tested, validated, all previous capabilities are tested and validated before a final release. AI can certainly help in it. How many organizations are using it? Limited. But yes, that's it, maturing as we speak out, and there'll be more and more solutions which will be coming out. Okay. Prashant, can we move to?
absolutely. Over to you, Aushdeep.
Yeah. So, well, Prashant has shared a lot of areas around how this has originated, how this has worked, and what are the boundaries around it. Can you also move the slide, Prashant? I guess you muted.
Yeah, seems to be a bit of a delay. I'm seeing the next slide. Hopefully, you can in a second as well.
Okay, I am still on the same slide.
Okay, let me try resharing.
I'm sorry, guys, but let me do one thing. Let me have the.
AI
So,
can't fix everything.
Unfortunately, not.
no, well, there's no. It all happens, technology when you need it. So, yeah. Anyways, we are. By the time Prashant brings up the slide, because I at a place I'll not be able to share, but what we are trying to say is wherever where we are trying to leverage Gen AI in SIAM. From a SIAM perspective, we are basically focusing on supplier and multi-supplier orchestration and services out there. Now, as and when there are new and new providers which are basically coming in the market and they are addressing certain gaps which the mainstays could not. And they're coming up with those products and solutions and use cases which are out there. Now, for SIAM, it becomes challenging because they have new metrics. For example, for an event, let's say this event, you will have specialized providers who are basically providing these services. And these events may not be common to an organization. So the organization would like to see how this has been performing. So service performance is very important as to how the user experience has been with which event and how we tackle it out. And GenAI is certainly helping us basically in tracking this across, so we can build in supplier scorecard, we can see how supplier user experience has been and how supplier fundamentals are going across. And we can also predict, in case it's a running system, that how the future will be in case certain parameters break or supplier performance will be. And this is what we're trying to develop as part of GenAI. From a user experience standpoint, we are looking into this overall service experience. User experience, you're already tracking and working it out. There are already smart systems which tell us that how systems are performing, whether there are any issues with those. Now, compounded with the GenAI solutions, it also tells me what issues you may have in case certain parameters or observabilities come out from your systems, and how we can mitigate it before you even noticing it. And if you have noticed a degradation, how quickly we are able to address it. So this is what GenAI is helping us drive, that proactivity in the entire service delivery. And this is across. Now, when it comes to cross suppliers, this experience has to be seamless. It is not to there as of now, but this can help us identify where the experience dropped so that we can enhance it, we can correct it, and we can rectify it working with the right suppliers. The next area which is out there is around the assurance pieces. We are working on use cases which are talking about the biggest example which we just talked about is the CI/CD testing or rollouts, that the service is not affected and all the use cases are tested before they are rolled out. And most of the cases, those GenAI or AI systems are helping us test and roll those out. Apart from that, around the audit and compliance areas, running automated audits, whether all compliance norms or regulatory norms had been taken care of while, let's say, performing a change or doing certain activities, and we are meeting to all the regulatory standards. So that service assurance use cases are being constantly generated, and we are leveraging GenAI in certain of those. Improvements is another. AI, this is a common use case where GenAI can provide you improvement use cases where there are deflections or dips in service deliveries so that you can identify or drive improvements across the board. And we are certainly using this. This is one of the first easiest use cases which has originated initially from the established parameters. And this is continually improving because we are driving those benchmarks, and GI is helping us to drive that journey or basically map that journey so that how we can improve from point Y to point X, let's say from 98% to 99% compliance of service delivery over the period of time with what all investments, and that is certainly being helped out. From orchestration standpoint, there are a lot of orchestration use cases. This is another one thing which Prashant had touched upon in the first slide. We started with the RBAs, which is runbook automations, and then the system automations or auto orchestration or auto fulfillment of tasks. And then coming into AI, which is basically replicating that over and over again by bringing that confidence factor, and generative AI, which is bringing that probability and confidence factor into a common thread so that the orchestration can improve without a human touch or automation, and experience can improve around it. What is it leading to? It is leading to us driving certain new metrics, which are like uh, 3 hour, 4 hour delivery times, fulfillment times. And these are being implemented across the customers, irrespective of a complex supplier landscape. And that is also coupled with the enterprise AI solutioning, which they're taking forward. And with the agent to agent interaction coming in place, service orchestration has become a core for at least the service delivery partners. From an optimization standpoint, it helps us identify which are the areas which are not working, which policies are not working, which procedures are not working, based upon feedbacks, continual uh, reviews, and inputs which are coming in from all areas. It helps us identify the data, process the data, and gives us opportunities to identify process optimization opportunities. So wherever there is a waste, AI can be certainly help to identify that. Wherever there are defects, it can help us to identify those. From our IT standpoint, we are using Gen AI consecutively to identify areas, for example, where we have been resolving without a knowledge article, for example. And yes, it helps us write the knowledge article and then publish it out so that it comes to reviews. At present, it's still human in loop. And eventually, we can help us decide whether it can be a part of the shift left initiative. That means it can come to a end user space where they can easily they can do it all by themselves. So basically eliminating that ticket or optimizing that altogether. Uh, we are also using in certain intelligence trends, predictive intelligence. Is talking about how we can use AI systems to predict how the future will be. It's a broad-based statement, but it works upon data analytics. The AI systems can help us analyze previous data statistics and give us basically estimates on capacity, availability, on future rollout plans, which might be impacting us in case we go ahead with certain changes. And this is the ability which we are still trying to achieve because we are still in human in loop in most of the cases. It's not autonomous. But yes, we are starting to get those intelligence out that if this change is deployed or if the number of users increase to a certain extent, your system might be at a critical capacity, or you may have to increase the workloads, or you may have to increase the network density. These are kind of things which we are seeing, which are being driven by smart enterprises across the board to predict this across. Knowledge, I've given an example around the process optimization for the knowledge management use case and how we're driving it, but knowledge is the core. Prashant had said it correctly. If your data is not correct, AI will fail. And knowledge is at the core for it. If you have to employ any automation system, be it AI, Gen AI, no AI, or basically anything, you will rely on the knowledge which has been created in the system. So it's important to clear and have the right data within your systems, which is being exposed to these solutions and LLMs. And driving the governance is most important. And that's where we come to an important topic, which is governance to the core, how SIAM is driving those things. And Prashant, can we move to the next?
Thank you very much, Aushdeep, for sharing that. If there's any questions for Aushdeep, that was a real speed tour through some of the different use cases there. But if you'd like to go into those in any more detail, then just pop a question in the chat and we can certainly discuss those in a bit more depth as well. But I'm going to take the floor now and talk briefly about governance, specifically AI governance in a SIAM context, because both Prashant and Aushdeep have mentioned the word autonomous, which from a technology perspective can make people a little bit nervous. But we've also been talking about human in the loop and the fact that many of these systems are enabling humans rather than being fully autonomous at the moment. So finding where that line is. So as with AI itself, as Prashant mentioned, there are both opportunities and challenges, but ultimately to be successful when we adopt AI, we have to have the correct governance in place. And when technology is moving as quickly as it is, it's tempting to rush. And shadow AI is a term that I'm hearing more and more of, as you know, maybe the central IT organization is a bit slow, so people are going off and procuring or using their own solutions. So we need to make sure we've got a robust governance model in place. But the good thing, and I know we've got a SIAM audience here, the good thing is that this is where the strengths of an operating model based on SIAM really come into play, because we already have the fundamentals there. We're already looking at our services holistically. We've got an end-to-end understanding of who's doing what. So one of the trends that we're actually seeing, and I think HCLTech have reflected this as well, is that we're seeing AI and automation roles now being embedded within that service integrator function. So part of the role of the service integrator becomes to look across the landscape and identify the opportunities for increased automation, for application of AI and advanced technologies. So the main opportunities within our SIAM ecosystem center around things like service provider alignment, risk mitigation, service consistency. And from an end user perspective, that can sound a little bit dry, but really it all comes back to one of the words that Aushdeep used, which was experience. This has always been one of the challenges in a SIAM ecosystem, has been delivering that holistic experience, making sure that as incidents, work requests, workflows move across the different providers in the model, that experience for the end user isn't degraded in any way. So while we are talking about things like data governance and operability, what we're really needing to do is look from that outside in perspective and say, how do we drive consistency across service providers, for example? So how do we unify platforms, data models? How do we make delivery absolutely seamless? It's an expression that's documented in the SIAM best practice, the swivel chair approach, where we're typing data from one system into another one. How do we move beyond that? And then that enables collaboration and integration. So reducing friction and giving better accountability across the ecosystem. So things like centralized service improvement logs, things like continual improvement initiatives that incentivize suppliers. We start to pull this data in from things like customer touchpoint metrics, performance reporting, and this does tie into the data that we collect at Scopism in the Global SIAM survey. So one of the things that comes up year after year is that organizations that are adopting SIAM want to be able to better attribute and understand their service costs and service performance. So that's reported pretty much every year as one of the strategic drivers for SIAM. And again, this helps us to do that across the ecosystem. It helps us to understand that. Interoperability as well, so seamless workflows, no more silos. There's an organization that I'm doing some work with at the moment, and you would be frightened as to what they're doing with a spreadsheet with some of their business critical data. But moving beyond that, and again, as I think a lot of organizations are starting to think about things like enterprise service management, enterprise SIAM, it's absolutely crucial that we have the technology that can underpin that, because the more manual activities that we introduce, the more challenging it is. And using the AI capabilities that we have now, we can automate so many more of those decisions. We can make those workflows much more seamless. And as Prashant was saying, that then reduces the costs and increases productivity. So if we jump onto the next slide, please. And Rory, I see your question. We will come to that at the end of this section. So the content on this slide, if you want to bring it all up, Prashant, we'll just look at it all at once. The content on this slide is based on a new publication which is coming from Scopism as part of the revised SIAM body of knowledge. So there's been a big project this year to update the SIAM body of knowledge, and AI was one topic that we just couldn't ignore. So there is a whole publication now dedicated to SIAM, AI and automation. The publication date is November 3rd. It's going to be available free of charge to everyone in the SIAM community. And Prashant is actually one of the authors for this document as well. So again, HCLTech there contributing to sharing the best practice in this area. So the first thing, if we look at the diagram that you've got there, one of the key things from a governance structure perspective is this has to span multiple layers. It's not something that you can drop on your IT department or your service integrator and say, take care of this. It has to span all the layers of the organization. But then, of course, with our SIAM perspective as well, not just that, it then has to spread out across our supply ecosystem too. So again, mentioned earlier, the fact that we now have to think globally from a legislation perspective. We might be based in the UK or India, but the supply ecosystem that we're using and the platforms that we're using will actually be global. And then there is now a whole plethora of AI legislation that's coming in. So depending on where data is stored, where decisions are made, where our consumers are, we need to make sure that we are watertight there. So from the strategic perspective, the key thing is leadership retains accountability. We can't drop this on a vendor. We can't drop it on a department of the organization. We have to see AI as an enabler, not an excuse for the decisions that get made. So any AI adoption has to be aligned with our organizational values, as well as the compliance requirements and the legislation and regulations that apply. That then cascades down to the tactical level, the managerial level. And this is where we need the kind of the next layer of governance to make sure we've got data integrity across service providers. And this comes back to that balance that we need to strike between decision support for humans and fully automated systems. So prepping for this session, we were discussing the fact that some level 1 service desk jobs now don't exist anymore because they can be fully automated, but there are some decisions that cannot be fully automated. So there needs to be that transparency at this level, not just a black box of, well, this is what happened, but we can't show you why. And then underpinning that, the operational level. So are the outputs correct? Are they validated? Have we got any bias that's creeping into our model? Have we got any cross-contamination between different LLMs in our ecosystem? So has to be holistic, and that's holistic within our organization and holistic across the supply ecosystem. And then you can see as well here some of the components of a typical governance model for AI and SIAM ecosystem. So I'm just going to pick a couple of these because I'm actually quite interested to get to the questions. I can see some good ones coming in. One that I'm going to pick on is strategy and values, because from a SIAM perspective, we have to align those values between what we class as a customer organization and the service providers, and they need to be embedded right through the SIAM ecosystem. So we can't have conflicting values. It comes back to SIAM principles about aligning everybody towards a common goal. Having an AI inventory. So again, those of us with a service management background, we're very used to things like configuration management databases, software, hardware, asset management. We now need to track AI platforms as well and be managing those. And the other one that I will just touch on as well is, of course, the compliance legislation and the local laws. So we need to be sure that we have identified all of the countries within the ecosystem, all of those who input, process, output, use, and we need to understand the legislation and regulations. And that is also very much a moving picture at the moment. So within this compendium, there is a list of the laws at the moment that are here or coming, but my expectation is that we will need to update that fairly regularly as more and more countries kind of get to grips with this. So I'm going to pause there. Prashant, if you just want to move on to the next screen, because there are a couple of links and QR codes that people can be scanning, but we will come back now and look at the questions. So if you've got feedback, there's a QR code for questions and for resources as well. So Prashant, if we dial back to Benkt's question, Benkt was asking about some real life examples and demos and not just slideware.
Understand where you're coming from, Bank. In terms of, I don't think we've got a demo that we could pick up on straight away. But in terms of real life examples, right, couple of those spring to mind. One, we're working with a customer who is global organization who are essentially demerging from their parent company. Significant number of local facilities spread across globally. They're into manufacturing, and effectively the knowledge base, for example, that's being built at a really fast pace. The moment a site comes on board, the knowledge curation based on the data that's being captured by the suppliers is being curated in about 1 week flat. Typical time frame that you see for a knowledge base being populated is about 6 weeks, 7 weeks at least, in terms of getting all the content in, making sure it's readable, and so on and so forth. And that's very same knowledge base is also moving them towards almost a no ops kind of a approach, because the AI is then consuming that knowledge base. So the AI is curating the knowledge. Secondly, the AI is consuming the knowledge to create then the self-help articles for the end users, and they're able to get through all of those pretty quickly. Significant gains that we are seeing in productivity. Couple of other places that we saw this happening was, for example, what you would call as a small language model, right? An SLM that's trained on very specific topics in isolated environments. Healthcare industry, for example, right? You get very, very specific terminologies that agents may or may not be immediately aware of. So those are some of the places where we are seeing significant gains being made, because effectively then in healthcare, rather than having to train the agent on every single terminology, take for example, this one customer that I'm talking about was US healthcare, and the way in which claims are raised and those claims are being serviced, that entire thing is being automated as we speak. So yeah, significant number of gains being made from that one thing. We are looking at various customers doing it in quite an innovative ways. So I don't think there is a single use case that I can point to, but these two kind of stood out in what I was dealing with right now.
Fabulous. Thank you, Prashant. Aushdeep, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I'm seeing quite a few questions which are around data and data and operations and something on typical AI infrastructure. So let me take up the data and operations, because the first thing is, if you want to deploy anything in your environment, you need to have established knowledge management practices. So let's come to the basics, because if your data is accurate, then only that AI system will take it up. It doesn't have any intuition of what is right and wrong. So what you teach to it is what it'll do. So if you're not basically feeding in the right data, you may not get the right results, and you may have a dependency on a lot of rework. And this is the issue which we are facing, where organizations are not looking into cleaning the data and having the right data statistics in place. That means having too many, let's say a simple example, too many support groups which are not being utilized while resolving an incident. Okay. Now, as and when the systems work out, we see that there are tickets which are going into those support groups, and they're lying there. There's no one looking at it. And yes, then when SIAM comes in, it part of the weekly or monthly governance, they may lead to being cancelled. And some of those tickets or data might be relevant in the future. And if that is not sorted right now, that means either if it is an event which is basically not requiring an intervention, that those systems are not in production, we have to clean up that system so that the tickets are not generated just for the tickets' sake. Rather, we find a better mechanism to do it. Because then else AI will not perform as to what it is supposed to perform, or it will perform task on some system where it should not be. Okay. So it's very important that how you're setting this up and how you're running it out. There is another question which you have is basically what is the typical AI infrastructure? Prashant has already mentioned that you look at it, for example, let's take a case of a typical SIAM environment. ServiceNow has Gen AI for virtual agent. Then we come to fulfillment systems. Every fulfillment system is coming up with its own AI and orchestration platform. So these days, like Claire has explained, there is a need for AI governance, which is applying that synergies together. So that agent to agent interaction is becoming a common use case, which is out there, where one agent, which is basically getting the user data and basically getting the user query, is basically passing on to the orchestration agent, who is doing the second task, which is around fulfillment of the task or identifying what resources are needed for that fulfillment of tasks, and maybe handing over to the third agent who is actually fulfilling it. So these days, it is not a taxonomy of one AI. It is basically a taxonomy of multiple systems working together, which are working on that cause to basically give a no touch or a zero touch service to the users, and also enhance user experience. And this is what we're talking about, be it ServiceNow, then your AWS engine, or any of your fulfillment engine, let's say next thing, or any other monitoring tool bringing some data on the user statistics as to what all is deployed. These are some of the tooling solutions which are there, and it's not one solution for all. It's a combination of multiple systems which is working
Right.
together.
Absolutely. And in terms of the same one, if you're looking more in terms of the answer on where does the AI compute, storage, and data integration sits, to be honest with you, again, horses for the courses, like Aushdeep mentioned, we are seeing increasingly, in order to save the cost, people are looking towards self-contained, smaller AI solutions that are very, very specific to a topic. And some of the organizations that seems to work really well. For some organizations, having a large LLM that's able to contextualize everything that's happening in the wider world, and generating answers based on what's happening in day-to-day life for others seems to make more sense. So if you're looking at, okay, how do I get a Windows problem sorted out? That's a very, very specific LLM. You don't really need an LLM for it. You need a very, very specific self-contained AI that has topic of that particular knowledge. So your architecture for that is likely to be self-contained or tapping into one external source to give you that answer. But if your question is how best do I get from place A to place B in the minimum possible time frame, figure out what the travel plans are going to look like, then you need an LLM, because now you have to look at 100 different data sources. So we are looking at multiple combinations of those as we go along on that path, to be honest.
Thank you both. We'll just give people a couple more minutes to type any last questions, but while we wait for that, just one question we prepped, which I'd really like to hear the answer to. Based on your experience across the clients that you're working with, what would you say the most common mistakes you see people making with AI and SIAM?
I think three key aspects, Claire. First one is, unfortunately, like with any newfangled stuff coming up, people tend to think it's the golden bullet. It's going to solve all the problems for them, and everything is going to happen in one single shot. It doesn't work that way, right? You have to have the background ready for it. The second one that we already touched upon, which is having the data for the AI to consume. And this is not just about data that you create, it is also the data that you allow the AI to tap into, like I was saying right now, right? Take an extreme example. If you've got your internal folks who are resolving your tickets, are all closing the tickets with just a dot or done, or the typical responses that we've all seen in an ITSM tool. Guess what happens when you implement an AI? The only solution that AI is seeing is dot or done, and therefore you're likely to get a response saying, if your Wi-Fi isn't working, try done. Right? That's essentially what happens. And secondly, where do you allow that AI to tap into? Are you going to allow the AI to take a look at supplier specific databases? Are you looking at other organizations who are working on similar things? Have you got a synergy with some of your partners where they are bringing the best of the breed knowledge? Those are the kind of things that people haven't really thought through on where they are consuming the data. And then that seems to produce suboptimal results as you would expect. And the third thing that we are seeing in terms of all of this is when you're creating the AI and trying to get the job done, are you defining the right goal for your AI? Right? Sometimes people tend to want to implement AI purely because somebody wants to say, I've implemented AI. For unfortunately, it's really important that you define what the business case for the AI that you're trying to implement is. How are you going to measure it at the end of the whole lot? And are you on track? So the value realization still needs to be tracked. That's one place where I'm seeing some of the AI programs which are beginning to go slightly off track because nobody's tracking the value.
Well, I'll just add one thing about it. What Prashant has said is absolutely correct. Is basically wherever we are seeing AI, we are seeing AI with costs. We are seeing AI with expenditure. We are not seeing AI with experience at most of the places, and that's where this fails. The value realization, what we drive as part for the customer, is what you want to achieve as part of the value, what this automation or the solution brings out to you. And majority of the places, if you talk about it, we are all giving solutions to customers based on their pain and the need areas. Now, if you do not define that correctly, you will not achieve the right objective. And at times, you may not even achieve the complete objective, but a partial of it, and you have to accept to it. If you say that implementing such a solution can basically help automate a complete life cycle of, let's say, a product being rolled out to the market, we may not have those use cases. They may come up in the future. But yes, we need to have the right use cases and the right expectations from AI, which is necessary to drive these across.
Thank you both very much. And I think Aushdeep summed it up there with the pain. Where does it hurt? And with any change, we need to think about starting where it hurts rather than where can we put AI in our organization. So we've ranged through a lot of topics today. We've talked about the opportunities and challenges and the increasing maturity of AI in SIAM ecosystems. We've looked at some different use cases and we've talked about the importance of governance. So I would like to say a huge thank you to Aushdeep and to Prashant for taking the time to be with us today, to Be Executive Events for organising this, and to everybody who's been with us as well and who shared your questions. I hope you'll use the links on the screen as well to share any feedback, to ask any questions that you maybe didn't have time to type today, and also to access the HCLTech resources. So thank you so much, everybody, for being with us. Thank you, Aushdeep. Thank you, Prashant. Really enjoyed this session.
Thanks for hosting, Claire. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for hosting, Claire. Likewise. Okay. And even to the BE events team. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.